My brother was standing in the driveway of my house. My house, the one I'd saved for 6 years to buy, holding a garbage bag of his things like he'd already moved in, and my mother was behind him smiling like she'd just solved a puzzle. I want to say I screamed. I want to say I drove forward, that I honked, that I said something devastating. Instead, I sat in my car with the engine running and stared at them through the windshield for a full minute. I had just driven 9 hours from Atlanta. I had a cup of cold gas station coffee in the cup holder and a dog in the back seat and a moving truck 2 days behind me. And my mother smiled at me like everything was normal. "We need to talk," she said when I got out. Those 4 words, I've heard them my entire life and they have never once meant anything good. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened, but I'll tell you the basics. I'm 31. I'm a software engineer. I worked remote for 4 years, saved aggressively, lived in a one-bedroom apartment outside Atlanta with 2 roommates until I was 28, and when the housing market dipped just enough in the fall of 2022, I bought a house in Knoxville. A 3-bedroom craftsman on a corner lot with a detached garage and a porch that wraps around the front. I paid $312,000 for it. I put down $60,000. That $60,000 came from years of skipping vacations, eating at home, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, and taking on freelance work every weekend for 3 years straight. I did not inherit anything. I did not have help. I did not get a loan from my parents, which I want to be very clear about because they will tell you differently. My brother is 26. His name is Donovan. He has never held a job for longer than 8 months, not because the economy is hard, though it is, but because Donovan finds reasons to leave. His manager is unfair, the schedule is unreasonable, the commute is too long, the work is beneath him. I have watched this cycle repeat since he was 19, and I have watched my parents excuse every single iteration of it. The summer I bought my house, Donovan was living in my parents' basement in Maryville, 40 minutes from Knoxville. He had been there for a year and a half. He was 25. My mother had converted the basement into what she called a studio apartment, which meant she bought him a mini fridge and a TV and continued to feed him dinner every night and do his laundry every Sunday. I moved into my house in October. I drove up alone, signed the final papers, walked through every room, sat on the porch with a bottle of wine I'd been saving, and cried a little because I had actually done it. I had actually done the thing I told myself I would do. I called my mother that night, and she said she was proud of me, and I believed her. What I did not know was that my mother had been telling Donovan for weeks that once I was settled, I would let him move into one of the spare bedrooms. She had apparently discussed this with him in detail, which room he would take, how long he would stay, what he would contribute. She presented it to him as decided. She had never once mentioned it to me. The first I heard of it was Thanksgiving, 6 weeks after I moved in. We were at my parents' house and Donovan said, "Over the mashed potatoes," so I was thinking I'd come up second week of January, give you some time to settle in first. I looked at him. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her plate. "Come up for what?" I said. The silence that followed was the kind that tells you everything. My mother set down her fork. My father cleared his throat. Donovan looked genuinely confused, which told me he had been told this was done. "Mom said you had the extra rooms," he said, "that you were going to let me stay while I figured things out." "Mom said that." "She said you two had talked about it." I turned to my mother. She had the look she gets when she's been caught. Not sorry exactly, more inconvenienced. "I thought you'd want to help your brother," she said. "You have the space. You told him we talked about it." I assumed you'd say yes. Those words. I assumed you'd say yes, as if my house was a foregone conclusion, as if the $60,000 and the 6 years and the 9-hour drive were all just logistics leading to the moment my brother needed a place to land. I said no. I said it at the Thanksgiving table with the cranberry sauce still sitting out. I said it clearly and I said it without apologizing, and I watched my mother's face do the thing it does when she doesn't get what she expected. It goes very still. Her jaw tightened slightly. She doesn't yell. She has never been a yeller. She just goes quiet in a way that fills the room. The drive home that night, I told myself I'd handled it. I told myself it was done. I was so naive. January came. I was deep in a work project, remote, barely leaving my house, surviving on coffee and delivery. I had a system. I had a routine. I had 3 houseplants I was somehow keeping alive, and a dog named Professor who slept on the couch, and a house that was mine in a way I had never experienced anything being mine before. On January 14th, a Saturday, I drove to the grocery store at 9 in the morning. I was gone maybe 90 minutes. When I came back, there was a car in my driveway that I didn't recognize. A gray Honda Civic with a Maryville bumper sticker and a cracked taillight. Donovan was sitting on my porch steps. He had 2 duffel bags, a backpack, and what appeared to be a small microwave. "What are you doing here?" I said. I didn't phrase it as a question. "Mom called you," he said. Mom did not call me. He pulled out his phone, showed me a text from my mother, sent that morning at 8:47, which said, "She's expecting you. Go ahead and bring your things inside. The spare key is under the mat." There was a spare key under my mat. I had put it there for emergencies when I first moved in and had not thought about it since. My mother had been to my house exactly once, for a weekend in November. I don't know when she found the key. I don't know if I mentioned it to her in conversation. I honestly don't remember, and that uncertainty is something I've had to make peace with. I stood in my own driveway with 2 bags of groceries and looked at my brother, and my mind went absolutely blank. "You need to leave," I said. "I just drove 40 minutes. I know how far it is. You need to leave." Mom said. Mom was wrong. "This is my house. You were not invited. You need to go." What happened next is the part I've gone over 100 times because I still don't fully understand my own reaction. Donovan started crying. Not dramatically. Donovan is not a dramatic person. He doesn't perform. He just sat down on my porch steps and put his face in his hands and cried in this quiet, exhausted way that made him look about 12 years old. He said he'd lost his job the week before. He said he couldn't afford his share of the rent at his friend's place. He said he had nowhere else to go and he was sorry. He was sorry he just showed up. He just didn't know what else to do. I let him in. I am not proud of it, and I'm not ashamed of it. I let him in because he was crying on my porch in January, and he was my brother. I told him 2 weeks. I told him that was the limit. 2 weeks, and I meant it when I said it. I called my mother from the kitchen while Donovan was in the bathroom. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "You sent him here without asking me," I said. "He needs help, sweetheart. You told him I had a spare key. You sent him without my permission, to my house. You would have said no." There it was again, that logic, the certainty that my no was simply an obstacle to be routed around, not an answer to be respected. 2 weeks, I said. Tell him 2 weeks. She said she was glad it was working out. The 2 weeks became 6 weeks. Donovan didn't find a job. He applied, or he said he applied. I genuinely couldn't verify, and he was pleasant enough to live with. He washed his dishes and walked Professor sometimes and didn't have people over. But 6 weeks became 10, and 10 became 3 months. And somewhere around the 3-month mark, I realized I had a roommate I hadn't chosen, and no clear mechanism for removing him. I want to be honest about something. I did not handle this well at first. I talked to my mother about it 3 separate times, and each time she shifted the conversation. "Donovan is trying. He just needs time. You know how hard the job market is. You're so lucky to have the house. Isn't it nice to have company?" I let those conversations end without resolution because I didn't want to be the villain. That instinct, the fear of being the villain in my own story, is something I've thought about a lot since then. It cost me months. The real fracture happened in April. I had a standing call with my team every Tuesday at 9. I always took it from my home office, which was the smaller of the 2 spare rooms, not the one Donovan was using. On this particular Tuesday, I came out of my office at 10:30 and found my mother in my kitchen. She had not called ahead. She had not texted. She was standing at my stove making eggs, wearing one of my flannel shirts, and she had brought, apparently, a suitcase. I thought I'd come stay for a bit, she said. Keep Donovan company while he gets settled. Get settled, I repeated. He needs support. This is my house. I know it is, sweetheart. She said it the way you say it to a child. I know it is. I know it is. But the but was always there, even when she didn't say it. I called my father. He was apologetic in the vague, helpless way he has been my entire life. Sorry about your mother. You know how she is. She means well. My father is not a bad man. He is also not a person who has ever, in my memory, told my mother no. I told her she had a week. She stayed for 3. During those 3 weeks, things happened that I have since been able to identify as a pattern, though I couldn't see it clearly at the time. My mother rearranged my kitchen. She bought throw pillows for my couch. She told Donovan's friend, a guy named Marcus who came over twice, that Donovan lived there. She referred to herself to a neighbor I barely knew as visiting her kids. Plural. Kids. The neighbor mentioned it to me over the fence one morning. I remember the exact moment because I was holding a cup of coffee and I went so still the coffee stopped moving. Your mom seems sweet, she said. She said you got your brother set up in the guest room. Did she? Said you're all real close. I went inside. I stood in my kitchen, with the throw pillows I hadn't chosen, and I thought, this is not going to stop on its own. I called a friend of mine from college, Priya, who had done a year of law school before switching to nursing. She said what I needed was documentation and clarity. Write down every incident with dates. Send a certified letter to your mother and brothers stating clearly that they are guests and the arrangement is temporary. If they don't leave by a stated date, you may need to formally initiate the eviction process, which in Tennessee requires proper notice depending on whether a tenancy has been established. That last part stopped me. Tenancy. I hadn't charged them rent. But 3 months is 3 months, and some states will recognize a tenancy even without a formal agreement. I called a real estate attorney. His name was Mercier, and he was blunt in the way I needed someone to be blunt. He told me that since I had not charged Donovan rent, he was likely a licensee, not a tenant, which meant my rights were stronger, but I still had to follow proper notice procedures to avoid complications. He said to send written notice, certified mail and text, document both, giving 30 days. He also said to document everything, photograph the state of any rooms, and under no circumstances agree to any arrangement that could be construed as a formal tenancy. I sent the notice on a Thursday. My mother called before the day was out. The call lasted 47 minutes. I know because my phone logged it. I've never been screamed at by my mother. She doesn't scream, but I have been guilt-tripped with the precision and endurance of someone who has been practicing for decades. She said I was selfish. She said she hadn't raised me to be this way. She said Donovan had always looked up to me. She said she didn't know who I had become. She said, and I want to quote this exactly because I've thought about it often, you have more than you need and you're choosing to have more instead of helping your family. My house, my $60,000, my 6 years, more than I need. I didn't yell. I said, the notice stands. 30 days. She hung up. The 30 days passed. They didn't leave. My mother said the notice wasn't serious. Donovan said he needed more time. My father called twice with variations of, can't you just give him until summer? Summer was 2 months away. I had given them the winter. I went back to Mercer. He filed the paperwork. Formal eviction proceedings in Tennessee go through General Sessions Court, and I want to tell you that taking your family to court is one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I sat in a waiting room with Donovan and my mother. My mother had inserted herself into this. She had shown up at the courthouse. She had told Donovan she would speak on his behalf, and I didn't look at them and they didn't look at me. The judge was a woman named Whitfield, and she was the kind of person who has heard every version of every story and has exactly 0 patience for theater. She looked at my documentation. She looked at the certified mail receipt. She looked at the text records. She asked my mother, who had stood up to speak, to sit down. She told her that she was not a party to this matter. My mother sat down. The judgment was in my favor. Donovan had 7 days. Here is the part I want to be careful about because it is the part that still costs me something to talk about. On day 5, my mother called, not to apologize, to negotiate. She wanted to know if she could rent the room, officially, money changing hands, so that Donovan would have legal standing to remain. She used those words, legal standing. She had Googled this. She was asking me, in essence, to help her find a mechanism to override a court judgment in my own home. I said no. She said I was going to regret it. She said Donovan had nobody. She said he was fragile right now, and she didn't think I understood what it meant to have someone depend on you. She said she had done everything for both of us, all our lives, and she couldn't understand why I was doing this to her. To her, she said to her. I hung up. Day 7, Donovan left. He did not say goodbye to me. He loaded his car, the gray Honda, the cracked taillight, and he drove away, and he did not look at me once. I watched from the upstairs window. I am not sure what I felt. Relief mostly. Some grief underneath the relief. The specific grief of watching a relationship end not with a fight but with a person choosing not to look at you. My mother texted me that night, "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. What I didn't know, because I hadn't thought to look, was that before Donovan left, he and my mother had done some paperwork of their own. Mercer called me 3 weeks later on a Tuesday, same day as my standing team call, Irony noted. He said he had received a letter from a law firm, not a big one, a 2-person operation in Maryville, claiming that my mother had documentation showing she had contributed to my down payment and was therefore a partial equity owner of the property. I sat down on the floor. My office floor, the smaller spare room, the one I'd actually chosen. She had not contributed to my down payment, not $1. I had bank records going back 6 years. I had every transfer, every paycheck, every freelance invoice. My down payment was $60,000 accumulated across 72 months of deliberate, documented saving. What my mother had produced, and I saw this eventually through the legal process, was a handwritten note, undated, that said she had given me $15,000 to help with the house. It was signed by her. It was not signed by me. It was not consistent with any bank record, any tax document, any written communication between us. She had, as far as Mercer and eventually a forensic accountant could determine, produced a document after the fact. Document fraud, that's what Mercer called it, quietly, before he called it anything official. I want to explain what it is like to discover that your mother has forged a document to claim partial ownership of your house. It is not dramatic, not immediately. It is quiet. It sits in your chest like a stone, and you carry it around for days before it fully becomes real. I went through every text, every email, every voicemail I had from my mother over the previous 6 years, looking for any mention of money. There was nothing. There had never been an offer. There had been no conversation. She had watched me scrimp for years, and she had never once offered to help, and now that the house existed and she wanted access to it, she had manufactured a reason she should have had. The stone got heavier. Mercer brought in a second attorney who specialized in real estate litigation. Her name was Voss, and she was efficient and methodical and completely unbothered by emotion, which is exactly what I needed at that point because I was not. We filed a quiet title action, a legal proceeding to definitively establish ownership, and we submitted my financial records, my bank statements, the freelance invoices, the mortgage documents, every piece of paper I had accumulated over 6 years of saving. The other side submitted the handwritten note. There is a moment in legal proceedings where something shifts, where the weight of evidence becomes undeniable, and you can feel it even if you can't articulate it. That moment happened when the notary who my mother claimed had witnessed the note, her name was on it, her seal, submitted a sworn statement saying she had no record of the document, had not witnessed any transaction between my mother and me, and that the notation of her seal on the document was inconsistent with her current seal, which had changed format when she renewed her commission 3 years ago. My mother had not just forged a note, she had forged a notary seal using an outdated format. My father, when Voss's office contacted him as a potential witness, stopped returning my mother's attorney's calls. I don't know what conversations happened in that house. I have never asked. He texted me once during the proceedings, just, "I'm sorry. I should have done more a long time ago." I read it several times. I haven't responded yet. I don't know what the right thing to do with that text is. The quiet title action was resolved in 4 weeks. Clear title, confirmed in my name, no encumbrances. The forensic accountant's report was referred to the district attorney's office for review. I was told by Voss not to expect criminal proceedings to move quickly if they moved at all, but that the referral was appropriate given the evidence. 2 months later, I received a letter from the DA's office confirming that charges had been filed against my mother for document fraud. I sat in my car in my own driveway and read that letter 3 times. Here is what I want to tell you if you are listening to this and you are in something that looks even a little bit like what I've described. The people who love you are not allowed to override you. Love is not a key under the mat. Love is not a suitcase you bring without asking. Love is not a handwritten note that appears when it becomes convenient. I have not spoken to my mother since the day Mercer called about the forged document. I have not spoken to Donovan since the day he drove away without looking at me. My father texted once and I haven't found the answer yet. I have Professor who still sleeps on the couch. I have 3 houseplants which now number 7 because I had time again. I have a porch that wraps around the front of my house, and in the evenings when the light is right, it is exactly as good as I knew it would be when I first walked through the door. I didn't lose the house. I lost the version of my family I had spent 31 years trying to believe in. That's a harder thing to hold, and I'm still figuring out how to hold it. But I am holding it here, in my house, which is mine. I keep coming back to the spare key. Not the forgery, not the court date, not the text that said, "I hope you're happy." The spare key under the mat that I put there myself and forgot about. That's the detail that stays with me, because it's the one I handed them. Every other thing they took, they had to reach for. That one I left out in the open. I don't say that to blame myself. I say it because I've had to get honest about the ways I made it easier for this to happen. Not the fraud. That's on my mother entirely. But the months I let slide, the conversations I ended without resolution, the times I chose peace over clarity because I was afraid of becoming the difficult one. That fear is something a lot of people carry and never name. The fear that if you hold your line, you're the villain. That if you say no clearly, you're the cold one. I spent years confusing softness with virtue, and this situation was the thing that finally pulled those two apart for me. What my mother did took a specific kind of intelligence turned in the wrong direction. She understood systems, spare keys, assumed permissions, the slow accumulation of presence until presence becomes claim. She understood that if she moved incrementally, I might not notice until the cost of pushing back felt too high. That's not stupidity. That's calculation. And for a long time, I responded to calculation with goodwill, which is like bringing a casserole to a chess match. The goodwill was real. It just wasn't the right tool. What changed things wasn't anger. Anger came and went. What changed things was clarity, the decision to look at the situation as it actually was instead of as I wished it would be. Priya told me to document. Mercer told me my rights. Voss showed me that a forged notary seal has a paper trail. Every piece of that required me to think carefully, to stop reacting emotionally and start building something solid. I had done that once already. 6 years of building, saving, choosing the long game over the easy one. I had to do it again, just in a different room. Donovan drove away without looking at me. I've thought about that a lot. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's someone who has never been asked to build anything because the people who loved him kept building for him, and eventually they tried to build with what was mine. The cost of that, for him, is that he is 31 years old. No, 26. With no foundation of his own, because no one ever loved him enough to make him stand on his own ground. That's the thing about doing the hard thing for someone versus doing the easy thing at them. My mother thought she was helping Donovan. She was making him smaller. I have 7 houseplants now. That sounds like nothing, but it's not nothing. For years, I told myself I was too busy, too unsettled, too in between to have things that needed tending. The house changed that. Then this whole fight changed it further. You cannot go through what I went through. The documentation, the attorney fees, the court, the certified letters, the forensic accountant, your father's text that you still haven't answered, and come out the other side without knowing, with real certainty, what you are made of. I know what I'm made of. 72 months of receipts and a clear title and a porch that wraps around the front. That's enough.